What is up, guys? It's Doodoo Poker here, back for another video. Today we are going to be talking about Reg MDA principles. I have 3 hand histories prepared that talk about Reg MDA principles, so let's get into the action. For the first hand, I borrowed a hand history from someone in my Discord group. His screen name is hilarious. It's Big Dumper. But this hand history illustrates 2 very important MDA principles for regulars. So let's get into this hand. We are in the small blind with Jack 4 of clubs. We raise pre-flop. Let's speed this up a little bit. We raise pre-flop. I'm going to follow along in the solver as well. And our opponent calls. Now the flop comes King of clubs, 9 of diamonds, 5 of diamonds. And we c-bet flop for small. I'm going to follow along in the solver and also in the actual hand. So flop goes small c-bet, big blind calls, turn goes check, check. We have no equity on the turn, so good check on the turn, 6 of spades. We have Jack 4 of clubs, nothing else to do but check, and our opponent checks back. The river is the important point. The river becomes a 3 of hearts. Now, we can bet this or check this. He decides to check. Our opponent in the big blind bets. Now, let's see what sizing he uses. So, our opponent in the big blind bets here. He uses 585 into 9. So, that's around 65%. Now, Big Dumper does something very unorthodox here. He check raises. And our opponent folds. This is not a GTO thing. But why is this a good play? This is a good play because of Reg MDA principles. I'm going to put it in a solver first. So he checks river. It was 65% in game. Let's say it's 60. And you see Jack 5 of clubs or Jack 4 of clubs always folding because we don't block anything. But that doesn't matter because of Reg MDA principles. Let's look at data for call, check, bet for a big blind in this position. This is Reg MDA for the field as single raise pot in position pre-flop caller small blind versus big blind. What do you notice? You notice when we c-bet small on the flop, remember he went 65% on the river, that between bet 50 and bet 70, it's overbluffed. And what do we know about a Reg MDA principle? A Reg MDA principle is any overbluff spot by a reg is by definition overfolded. There's 0 exceptions to this rule. 0 exceptions. So because call, check, bet is overbluffed, check raising as a bluff is positive expected value. But this brings me to my next Reg MDA principle. Very important one here. The second one is if an overfolded range check raises. So what do I mean when I say overfolded range? Well, we have to look at it now from the big blind's perspective. Let's go back to the hand. From the big blind's perspective, when the small blind bets flop, checks turn, and checks river, let's look at folding frequencies. We want to look at folding frequencies. We want to look at folding frequencies for bet 30 check fold. So check on the turn and then check fold on the river. What do you notice? From the big blind's perspective, this is massively overfolded. This number should be 50. This fold 70 should be 41. This fold 50 should be 33. So they're overfolding almost twice as much as they should be. So this brings us to the second Reg MDA principle. If an overfolded range check raises and the previous street was checked through, like in this hand, flop went bet, turn went check, check, river went check, raise, it is overbluffed on that street. This is very important principle. I'm going to show you 2 other hands that illustrate this principle. Let's go into the second hand that I have prepared. In the second hand, I'm going to show you pocket jacks in the hijack. This is a 3-bet pot. My opponent raises under the gun, and I 3-bet, and he calls. Now let's follow along in a solver. Shout out to Big Dumper for letting me use this hand, by the way. Thank you for that. So let's go to the second hand. In the second hand, we have jacks, and we 3-bet, and under the gun calls, and the flop comes 9 of spades, 8 of diamonds, 6 of clubs. We know from theory this is not a range bet. That means I can do whatever I want on the flop. I can check or I can bet. So I decide to check back. Now on the turn, a 7 of clubs comes. So flop goes check, check. And my opponent, who's under the gun, checks again. Even though he should not be doing this. He should be ranging. He checks. What do I know about the principle? Let's look at the field as at a position pre-flop caller. Now this is cut off first button, but the same trend applies for all positions. When they check twice, what does that mean? That means they overfold. Look how often they fold to a delayed C-bet. Check, check, fold. 40 to 46, they're overfolding, 10, 15%. But we have to go to the second MDA principle. If an overfolded range check raises and the previous street was checked through, it's overbluffed. Again. So when I bet turn here and he check raises me, I know it's overbluffed. And then he bets river and I call and he has air because of the second MDA principle. We know it's overfolded. We know the range is too weak. That means when they show aggression and the previous street was checked through, it's overbluffed. All right, so let's go to the third and final hand history that shows these two Reg MDA principles. The final hand history, we are on the button, and we have pocket kings. And our opponent is in the big blind, who is a Reg. So, IRFI, he calls, the flop comes, 10 of spades, 7 of spades, 2 of diamonds. 10 of spades, 7 of spades, 2 of diamonds. Now here, I bet bigger sizing, around 2/3, and he calls. Now, let's say I go 75. Now, on the turn comes a 6 of diamonds. Here, my opponent's supposed to have a donking range, so if you have a donking range, you don't want to bet nearly as much. So in theory, this is always bet, but if I node lock this to having donking, it won't bet all the time. So we check back on the turn. The important point is the river. So the turn goes check, check, and the river comes an ace of hearts. In theory, when big blind checks here, kings is never supposed to bet. But he knows MDA. That means he will call down later because why? Because, let's go to the data, because bet check bet is overbluffed. If he knows MDA, he's going to call me down with non-ace-x pairs, so I'm betting merged on the river. But this brings us again to our second Reg MDA principle. If an overfolded range check raises, remember, let's look at check call, check, check fold. Check call, check, check fold. Overfolded, this should be 50, this should be 41, this should be 33. All overfolded, button versus big blind. Second Reg MDA principle. If an overfolded range check raises and the previous street was checked through, remember the turn went check, check, this street is overbluffed. So when I go for thin value on the river and my opponent jams, I always call and he's bluffing. These three hand histories illustrate the two Reg MDA principles. Well, there's more than two, but two for this context of this video. Any overbluff spot by a regular is by definition overfolded, no exceptions. If an overfolded range check raises and the previous street was checked through, it is overbluffed on that street. In the first hand, we saw the bet check, check raise line from our friend Big Dumper, and he was in the small blind, and his raise is not theory approved, but it's good because of the first principle. It's an overbluff spot, and the call check bet line, as we see from the data here. On the second hand, we know check, check, raise bet is going to be overbluffed because of the second MDA principle. An overfolded range check raises. The previous street was checked through. It is overbluffed, so we call with the Jack's hand in this hand. And finally, on the river, when I bet flop and the turn goes check, check, and I bet river, we know the river check raises over bluff because of the second Reg MDA principle. If you enjoyed this type of content, please give me a like, please give me a subscribe. New video every single day, 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, and I will see you guys in the next video. Take care.